Well, after weeks and months of hard work getting your petitions together, now's the time to prepare your packet to file to run for office. This is like the one official thing you do to make sure you're on the ballot. Everything else you do during the campaign is not really official like this is, so you gotta get this right. That's why I've got Ryan Kilduff with us. He helps all of our clients and candidates pull together their filing packets. So Ryan, thanks for joining me.
Thanks for having me.
Let's talk about what this packet is. So before we get into what's in the packet, what are we talking about with a filing packet, or even just filing for office for those new candidates?
Well, you're officially filing to run for office. You're legally establishing your name. You're giving it to the electoral authority, depending on where you file, and that's what's going to put your name on the ballot. You will get a official document saying you're a candidate as well about a month later.
So that's why we're saying this is the official thing. Don't screw this up. No pressure, but don't screw this up. We're going to give you some tips and tricks towards the end of this video on things you should look at in your packet to make sure you don't screw this up, because we see so many errors in these filing packets. And the good news is when they're in our opponent's packets, we can knock them off the ballot. So that's nice. But we like you and we want you on the ballot, so don't screw this up. When is filing period in Illinois this cycle, Ryan?
Filing begins on November 27th, which is a Monday, and ends on December 4th, which is also a Monday.
Okay, so there's a 1 week period, roughly Monday to Monday.
Right.
It's actually 8 days, right, officially. So what's the strategy that goes into this on when you might file in that window? How does that all work?
So you and your team will need to decide when you want to file. There's basically 3 different openings. There's the first hour on the first day, November 27th. This will put you in the lottery for first ballot position. There is the window between the first hour and the last day. That'll be, depending on who files first, that's going to be your order. Or the last hour on the last day, December 4th. That'll put you in the lottery for last position. Everybody wants the coveted first ballot position. Then it's kind of universally accepted that last position is the second best, because you don't want to be pegged in the middle. The last position might be tied with being second if there's 4 candidates, but at the end of the day, you want first. Go get it if you can.
Okay, so as Ryan was saying, if you're in line prior to the opening of the election authority office, so in the state that's usually 8 a.m., right? Some county clerks might have different times, so make sure you look it up. But if you're in line prior to that time, no matter where you are in line, you could have gotten in line at 7:59, but as long as you're in line prior to opening, you then, when you file, will be in that lottery for the first spot, unless you're the only one there, in which case you're guaranteed the first spot on the ballot. As Ryan also said, that last hour on the last day is again a lottery to potentially be the last spot on the ballot, because if you're not first, you want to be last. This is not like Ricky Bobby, where it's a bad thing if you're not first, you're last. In politics, on the ballot, best spot is number 1. Second best spot is either number 2 or the last one. There's different beliefs on what that might be. But being first on the ballot in some races can be up to a 6% bump. Being second or last is sometimes as many as 2 or 3 points. Being stuck in the middle can lose you points. So when you file is an important thing. Make sure you talk it through with your strategy team, because in many races, where you are in the ballot actually has a big impact on your election outcome. Okay, enough on that. Let's talk about pulling the packet together. First things first, we've got to give you a suggestion. Make sure you get expert advice, either an election attorney or somebody like Ryan or myself or our team who have done hundreds and hundreds of packets. We've done what? Gotten over 600 candidates in the ballot and 0 knocked off?
Correct, yeah.
So talk to someone who knows what they're doing. You don't want to screw this up. That said, you're going to start to pull this together with Thanksgiving coming up. You may want to do it a little early. What goes in the packet? What is this packet made up of?
So there's several components to your packet. The Statement of Candidacy, the Loyalty Oath, which is optional. Obviously your signatures over the minimum and 3 times if you can get it. Sometimes, depending on the type of office you're running for, you may have your certificate of attached deletions and certificate of deletions. But those are the main components that are bound within your packet. In addition to your packet, you have your receipt for your Statement of Economic Interest.
So let's go through those all briefly one by one. So Statement of Candidacy goes first. That's a form that the state of Illinois provides. You use their form that they provide for your race, because they do have different statements for different types of races, and you simply fill that out top to bottom. It's fairly simple to follow. Just make sure you fill in every field, right? And you have to get that notarized, signed and notarized, correct?
Correct.
Okay, and we'll talk about things we've seen that people screw up at the end of the video. Next thing then you said, loyalty oath. And as you said, that's optional. It's kind of an antiquated document that basically says you're not a communist. Some people sign it, some people don't. It's not necessary, but you can choose to sign it. If you do, it goes second behind the Statement of Candidacy. Still good, right?
Correct.
All right, now your petition packet. So however many petitions that you have then go next. Numbered 1 through whatever, those go next. Every single one needs to be filled out by their circulators, needs to be signed, needs to be notarized. They all need to be uniform. And as I said, they have to be sequentially numbered. That's important for the objection process comes down the road. Still good?
Yep.
All right. And then as you said, there are some times when you might do deletions. When are those times? Because then that paperwork goes at the back behind the petitions. What are those situations?
The only time you'll need to do that is if you have a maximum and you've exceeded your maximum. Otherwise, there is no point in going through this process.
So in order to do a deletion or strike a signature, there's a whole process. It has to be struck by a specific person, has to be initialed by that person, and then there's certain paperwork that has to be filled out in order to officially strike that signature. Otherwise, it's not actually officially struck. The point Ryan's making is one I wholeheartedly agree with, which is if you don't have a maximum, don't strike signatures. There is no point in doing your opponent's work for them. If they want to challenge signatures and get them struck because you have an address that's 7 counties out of district, or you have somebody who didn't fill in all the information, okay, you know what? Make them do that work. Why do the work for them? Let them have to go through the effort, because a signature is counted as official within your signature count until it's challenged and overruled or withheld, depending on how it's done. So let them go through that effort. In the meantime, it'll be counted as a signature, so take the number in your total number, make them do the work. That said, which offices have maximums? Those are the state offices, correct?
State representative, state senate. Correct.
Okay, so the state ledge offices have those maximums that are going to be on the ballot this time around. So if you're running for state legislature, that's where you're going to have a maximum. It's going to be 1,000 for, or is it 1,500 for state rep and then 3,000 for senate?
Well, the minimums are, you're talking about the maximum.
The maximum, yeah.
Yes, 1,000 and 1,500.
Yeah, all right. So you're 1,500, 3,000?
1,500, 3,000. I repeated you wrong. 1,500, 3,000. Even we have to look at it again. That's right.
Yeah, so the window is 500 to 1,500 for state house, right? And then it's 1,000 to 3,000 for state senate. So okay, so you're going to have a maximum. That's where, as Ryan said, if you get over the maximum number, here's the tricky thing about the law. If your maximum is 1,500 and you submit 1,600, they're only going to take the first 1,500, and everything after that they're just going to ignore. Here's the problem: if the next 100 is a really good 100, you might be in trouble, because the only ones that count are that first 1,500. That's why you want to strike them yourselves. Strike out 100 that are bad, that you can find that are bad within that, and now you have an even more solid packet. That's why with the maximum, you absolutely do want to strike signatures, because that means you've gotten over the maximum, and now you're bringing yourself back into compliance with that number. It's not a bad thing. You won't be knocked off if you file too many signatures. It's just every signature you get after that last number just doesn't count, and that could put you at risk if you're challenged. So you don't want to take that risk.
Yeah, it's not worth it.
Yeah. It's a little bit of an arcane process on how you do the striking. There's one piece of paper you have to fill out that says which signatures have been challenged, and then there's another piece of paper that say which pages have strikes on them. It's a whole stinking thing. It's kind of dumb, but you said the two forms before, right?
Yeah, that's the certificate of attached deletions, which is where you say which pages are getting signature struck, and then the signature of deletions, very creative in naming that one as well. And that's where you tell which page and which signature line are officially being struck.
And you have to do both. So make sure you do that right if you do strike signatures. Again, reach out to Ryan or me or our team if you've got questions. All right, as we close this out, here's what we'll finish on. What are some of the things that each of us have seen that candidates have done that have been problems, that are either maybe almost knocked them off the ballot or have knocked them off the ballot, mostly with the paperwork. We've covered petitions before. So other than the petitions themselves and the structure of those, what have we seen in the whole filing packet? Start with you on some things you've seen.
Well, I mean, the first thing anybody looks at is the Statement of Candidacy. If you list your office incorrectly, that's an easy out. A lot of people will confuse the full term or partial term section of the office because it's not widely used, and you often don't know that there is a partial term even available. And if you fill that out, you are actually acknowledging you're running for an office that doesn't exist.
So and what Ryan's talking about is if you're running for office, typically it's going to be for a full term. There are some times where there's actually a partial term. If somebody resigned and you're just going to be filling a certain period of their original term, that's now a partial term, and there's going to be a certain word for that, like a 2-year term or something. It will be in the paperwork, you can find it. But just make sure you don't screw up what you put in that term section. More often than not, it's just full term, but you want to make sure you get that right, because as Ryan said, you're not just putting language in there. By saying full term, that means it's a specific office. By saying 2-year term, you're saying that's a specific office. We see this screwed up a lot for municipal races.
Yeah.
Thankfully, it's not as often screwed up here in general election races, but still, something to keep an eye on. That office one is one I've seen messed up a lot of times, where you don't put in there specifically the office you're running for and do it correctly. There's going to be the office you're running for, and then there's going to be, what is it called? Not region. Jurisdiction or region or something like that. District. And so if you're running for, let's say, Lake County Coroner, right? Your district or your jurisdiction is Lake County. The office is coroner. You want to make sure you're getting all those correct. For judicial races is where it's more often screwed up, because there's specific sub-circuits, there's specific circuits you got to put in there. Then there's the vacancy. You got to make sure you put in there which vacancy you're going for. And it may seem like these are just words, but this is legalese to specifically say which office you are running for. By not including the correct legalese, you may be saying you're running for an office that doesn't exist, and that could be a fatal flaw. That could get you knocked off the ballot. So this may seem like, oh, it's just a word here, a word there, but it's actually a lot bigger than that. So the good news is for judicial office, they put out a list of the vacancies. So you can copy paste from the election authority what the specific name for the vacancy is and get it right. So you want to be really intentional about the office and the jurisdiction, the language that you put in there for the district or whatever they call it.
Yeah, and lastly, you want your name needs to match what you used on your petition. We don't need to get creative here. They're equal to one another.
Yeah, the name must be the same in the statement of candidacy as it is at the top of your petition in that header portion. If the name is not the same, you're in trouble, you got a problem. That is a fatal flaw. So you got to make sure you're matching that name. I always get the question then of, well, how do I sign it? If I'm running for office as X, then how do I sign it? The answer is your signature is your mark. It's not your name. So your signature could simply be an X. It's whatever you sign as, that's your signature. So don't change your signature because on the ballot you're going to run as Fred instead of Freddie. That's not how that works. A signature is a signature. You just sign it. Don't change the way you sign because now your ballot name is a little bit different. Now you're running as Daniel instead of Dan. So everyone's like, oh, should I sign it as Daniel? No, your signature is your signature. Just sign it as you sign every legal document, as you signed your, when you registered to vote, you want that to match. So do not change your signature.
Yeah, not at all.
All right, what else? What else have you seen get screwed up here?
Well, the next one's the loyalty oath. There's really no way to screw that up. If you do,
it's optional. It doesn't matter.
Yeah. And then you got your petition pages. Everyone gets a little nervous about numbering them together, and that's just double check, and triple check, and have another set of eyes on there, because you can easily skip a number just because you're writing it down really fast.
The good news is that unless you don't number any of it, if you screw up a number, that's not usually a fatal flaw or never has been a fatal flaw, so that's the good news. But if you don't number them at all, that is a fatal flaw. So make sure you're numbering them, number them sequentially, and ideally don't screw it up. Double check it. This is why we put in our instructions for petition passers, don't number the pages, because when you pull those pages together, you're going to want to decide the numbering for yourself, and you want to decide the order for yourself. I always put the best sheets at the front. I always put the sheets that my candidate got at the front, sheets that were done door to door that are really, really good, that look good, because keep in mind a lot of this process is subjective. For the election authority, for the clerk's office's employees who are looking at this paperwork, it's a bit subjective. It shouldn't be, but it is. If your packet looks like it's buttoned up, like it's pretty, like everything looks great, you went door to door, this is going to deter people from objecting to you, and it's, when they do object, it's going to make the clerk's office employees and the election authority all go, oh no, this is frivolous, this candidate has their stuff together. But if it looks like it's really sloppy, they're going to look even deeper at your petition packet. So make it look good, get it all buttoned up, order those petitions so that the best sheets are at the front, make sure it all looks nice and clean, everything's done properly, everything's done written in good handwriting. All of this will minimize the odds you get objected to and, sadly, increase the odds you survive a challenge. So keep that in mind.
Yeah, at the end of the day, presentation matters. The petitions oftentimes prints a little differently depending on the printer or the paper. That's not a big deal. But presentation and the ordering of how you show your signatures, you want to be strong. You even want to end a little strong so that, because people kind of check the front and the back. Another thing that we see is making sure that your petitions are uniform. This is a fatal flaw. Some candidates may have had to restart. Maybe they caught an error, or maybe they wanted to change something midway through. Everything that you had before, get rid of it. Do not put it in your packet, because then you're not uniform and you could be kicked off the ballot fairly quickly.
Yeah, the petitions have to be uniform, have to be the same. So if you've got two different types of petitions, or you restarted, or throughout it you were writing them, so now they all look different, all of that is problematic. The writing one you can rehab, but you're going to have to rehab it. Someone will probably challenge you on that. So just be smart, keep them uniform. Another thing we always see is the way that they are bound. The way these petitions are bound is very specific. You cannot use something permanent like staples, but you also can't use something that doesn't bind it strong enough, because believe it or not, the test for whether or not your petition packet is strong enough is to throw it against the wall. If it sticks, it was bound properly. If it doesn't, it was bound improperly. This is how arcane election law is in this state. So you want to bind it properly, but again, you can't use something permanent like staples. So that magic word, Ryan, that we always forget, what's the
fasteners?
Fasteners. We can use fasteners here. Tell us about how you should properly bind this.
So statement of candidacy, loyalty oath, all your signatures. If you need the certificate of deletions, put all that together, make it look nice, stamp it down, and then you poke your holes in with a 2-hole punch, preferably if you have one, and then place your fasteners.
Yeah, so we've got 2-hole punches. You're welcome to come by the office if you want to borrow one or just buy one. You can use a 3-hole punch, but it's better with the 2-hole punch. You want to cut out as little, because what ends up happening as you punch those holes is it tends to cut through some of that header language in your petitions. And so when you're using 3 holes, it just makes that worse. 2 holes is better. It's standard for this. And then get those fasteners. Make sure they're long enough that they're going to go all the way through and that you can pull them around the edges to make it really tight. Make sure the front of the fastener, they have those small-headed fasteners and the big-headed fasteners. Get the big-headed fasteners, because the small ones could get pulled through that hole. You don't want to screw that up. You can get fasteners at Staples or online, or we have a bunch here. You're welcome to come by our office. But use high-quality fasteners. It's not worth screwing up on this. But you also want to buy a box of 100 just to get your petitions together. So again, just reach out to us. We've got boxes and boxes of fasteners. But you don't want to screw that up. As dumb as it sounds, the good news is ballot access has been increased in this state, so candidates are less likely to get knocked off the ballot. The appellate court has really opened this up, the Supreme Court as well. I've been involved with politics long enough. I was involved when people were thrown off the ballot for things as simple as the wrong fasteners. That doesn't happen anymore. That's probably a good thing. I kind of miss the old days, I'm not going to lie, because I did actually knock a candidate off for this, and it was awesome. But what are you going to do? But the good news is that they have loosened up those rules. But here's the thing, just don't take that risk. At minimum, you're opening yourselves up to an objection, to a challenge, which is going to cost you time, it's going to cost you money. Election season starts at full speed, sprinting on January 2nd. If at that time you're still worrying, am I going to be on the ballot or am I not going to be on the ballot? We've seen this with candidates all the time, where even when you say you're all in, you're not, because this part of your brain says I might get knocked off the ballot. And so you're not putting the money in, you're not raising the money, you're not working as hard, your volunteers are nervous, so maybe they're not working as hard. You don't want to get objected to, because it does lead to problems and it does lead to concerns, on top of the cost and the time it takes just to rehab and get yourself back on the ballot. So do it right, pull it all together, and don't screw this up. Any final thoughts on tips and tricks here or things to avoid?
Well, one thing that we didn't go over was you have to mind your circulators. They are new to this oftentimes, so the bottom, we need to check those. We need to make sure they circled city, town, village. We need to make sure they filled out their name. We need to make sure that the notary stamp isn't expired. So when you look at all your pages, top, middle, bottom, mind them all, check them all separately, make sure that everything looks good, make sure that everything is filled out, because oftentimes that's just, a circulator doesn't know the answer, so they just neglect to put it in there. Go find that circulator, fill that in, make sure that everything is complete.
Yeah, and by the way, on that, even look through those petition signatures. The one thing you're not allowed to touch is the signature itself, but believe it or not, you're allowed to write the rest of it. So if somebody signs it and they scribble their address, you can look up that address, get the actual address and print it in there to make sure it's correct. Don't touch the signature. Do not mess with the signature at all, otherwise you're in trouble. But if you don't touch the signature, you can correct a lot of the rest of the things, and that will rehab that signature. And so it's worth it. If there's ditto marks, write it in. If the address is messy, look up their registration, correct it. There's a lot of things that you can do in there to make sure that signature is going to survive an objection, and you're allowed to do that. Here's the tip we like to say is use the opposite color pen. Have a blue pen, have a red pen. If the voter signed it in blue, you write in black. So I said red and blue. Use red and black. Or
Blue and black.
blue and black, here we go, we're struggling today. Use blue, use black. If they signed in blue, you use black. If they signed in black, you use blue. Why do we do that? We do that so you're making it clear to the election authority, I did not in any way change what they wrote. I did not in any way mess with the signature or anything else. I used a different color, but I did add these things in which I am legally allowed to do. If you use the opposite color, it just looks better. It shows that, hey, look, I clearly didn't mess with the signature because I was writing in blue, they wrote in black. So even in the page, we're swapping pen colors to make sure we're never writing in the same color as that signature. But as a good tip, just to make sure it looks professional and you're not doing anything that could open you up to a challenge or a problem down the line. Yeah. So I'm glad you brought that up. That was really good. Plus it gave me a chance to screw up my colors. So it's very clear to our audience that I don't even know my primary colors. Why the heck are you listening to me for political advice? Probably shouldn't. All right, thanks to Ryan for joining me. Thank you guys for watching this. Again, this is not something you want to screw up. Go hire an election attorney. We know a number. We can hook you up with any of them. We don't make any money off it, but we're happy to connect you with an election attorney if you'd like to do that. If you want to work with us, we're happy to work with you. We do this very well. Ryan will take care of you, and we'll make sure you get on the ballot. But don't try to do this yourself. It's not worth the risk.